Okay, we are live for our second episode of Literatura Obscura. And for this, we covered Imajica, and Athena is way cooler than me. She has a first edition hardcover. I'm a little
By
jealous.
cooler, he means like older. I'm old, which is fine. I don't have a problem with this, but I'm old.
Maybe slightly more of a nerd than me, but that's up for debate. That's up for debate. So Magica, this is going to be a beast to go through, just like the last book. I actually did write down an outline. It's still like 9 pages, but I'm going to go through it as quickly as possible. But before we kind of dive in, Athena's going to give us a quick biography of Clive
Clive
Barker.
Barker. Yeah. So just very brief. He was born in Liverpool in 1952, and is grew up very much of that time and place, which, as I was just saying, is a little complicated if you are a gay man at that time and place. But yeah, it's one of those things where he came to that realization in his later teens, like, oh, I'm gay, like, this is what's going on with me. Because again, not a great environment to figure out your sexuality unless it's very straight and narrow kind of thing. And then as he went off to college, he started getting interested in theater and writing, and he was part of, I can't remember the name of the theatrical troupe, but that was where he met Doug Bradley, who later famously became Pinhead, the Hell Priest, in his um, uh,
Hellraiser.
Hellraiser movies.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm
Yep,
like
yep.
brain help.
That's
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
And then yeah, started writing, started getting more into potentially film, um, and he had written some short stories and had written Weave World, during which time, like during his early writing career, what I found out recently is that he was actually a sex worker. He was a hustler. And it's something he's not ashamed of, but he doesn't bring it up a lot either. Because I mean, I don't blame him. Like, how do you just randomly bring that up? Um,
Yes, I'm a famous author and filmmaker who've made incredible films that have changed the genre forever, but I was a sex worker to begin with because I was so poor.
yeah, yeah. Because again, writing doesn't necessarily bring you a ton of money right off the bat. Even if you're extremely successful, almost nobody gets Stephen King money in less than a decade at best.
It's like 1/10%
Yeah,
of the famous ones.
yeah, yeah. Music and writing don't usually make you rich, kids. Um, but yeah, so he had so of films, the first adaptation that was done, and I don't know you if you've ever seen it, but it's from the Books of Blood, so it's from one of his short stories.
Hell on
But
Heart.
Rawhead Rex.
Really?
It's a god awful movie. It is so bad, it is embarrassingly bad, and Clive Barker was not happy about this. So he basically just worked like crazy to be able to make Hellraiser. Um, and the budget was less than $1 million, I believe, which even in 1983 was ludicrously low money.
And if you look at the practical effects of
Oh,
Hellraiser,
it's
you're
so
like,
beautiful.
how did he do that on a shoestring budget?
I actually know some of that, but that's a different discussion.
Yeah, yeah.
Like the just ingenuity behind a lot of that is incredible. And so that kind of propelled him into being, a bit of a household name, and his writing, painting, drawing, directing career took off from there. He, I don't believe he has directed a film since Lord of Illusions, though,
Which
which,
was, in my opinion, one of the greatest horror movies of all time.
provided you see the director's cut.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a
Mm-hmm.
fun story, and this is absolutely true, I swear. So there was a theater called the Cooper Five. I don't think it exists anymore in Aurora. And when Lord of Illusions came out, my boyfriend at the time and I went there to see it. And we saw it and we were like, that was great. It was a little bit long, but like, this is a great movie, like, can't wait to talk to people about it. And then when we tried to talk to people about it, they were like talking about how it didn't make sense and like it just jumped around. We're like, what are you talking about? Like, we were utterly baffled because the movie they were describing sounded significantly different. We're like, are they just not paying attention, or and then years later I finally figured out what had happened because I saw the actual theatrical release of Lord of Illusions. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Where are all these scenes that I remember? What is going on? And then the director's cut came out and people were like, oh my god, it makes sense now. I saw it and I was like, that's basically what I saw. Like, I'm pretty sure that's the movie I saw. And it turns out what happened was the Cooper Five would get screening galleys for test audiences and reviewers and things like that. And back in the old days, your test galleys didn't always get destroyed. They didn't always get sent back to the studio, whatever they wanted to do. Sometimes
Oops.
they got left behind. And there was that and another film, I forget which the other one was, but there were two that I saw there where I effectively saw the director's cut.
Nice.
And
that is also like,
God.
I will also say, like, especially in the era of VHS, they would sometimes cut out scenes from movies in the transition from movie to VHS.
Yeah.
So sometimes you would be even seeing it on TV, and the TV version would be more
Significantly
uncut
different.
than, and this happened to a lot of movies. So
famously with Aliens, there's like 4 different edits of Aliens.
Yep, there is. So, and a lot of those 70s, 80s, 90s movies got, until you got DVD, where everyone was like, make sure you have all the content and the cut scenes and all this stuff.
Yeah, we can add 18 submenus and charge more for it.
Yeah, right. So, but yeah, so, Clive Barker, he has probably in about the last 5 years become my favorite author. I'm a huge nerd of his. I've read almost all of his stuff. I haven't read any shorts yet, but I've read all the novels at this point. So, we were talking about strange and obscure books, and also like, books that people don't frequently read. And this is if J.R.R. Tolkien had decided to write horror instead of epic fantasy. So it's kind of like an epic horror novel. It definitely has strong fantastical themes, but you're not getting dwarves, you're not getting elves, you're not getting orcs.
Oh, but you're getting much more fascinating species.
Yeah, like the Nalyanak.
Yeah.
Which is like a creature that has like 2 hands that are in a prayer shape, but then a ball of fire in the middle and can call down lightning to kill people. I mean, it's like a terrifying executioner species.
Yeah.
There's like the one with the little hands that like are up its back. It has little hands up its back. I mean, it's Clive Barker, so all the creatures are kind of terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a epic horror fantasy romance.
Yeah, the romance element is complicated, but I think there's also,
with
and we'll
body
get into
horror,
this,
with lots of body horror,
lots and lots of body horror, and there's undercurring tones of themes of different types of love. There's friendship love, there's mother-child love, there's the lack of father-child love, which is a key theme as well, and then there's lover love, right? So there's a lot of this kind of stuff going on. But let's dive into I'm going to do a super quick world review. There are dozens, super quick, dozens of characters. And the thing with Clive Barker is he does very rarely does he throw any side characters at you. I mean, he's a true theater person because theater doesn't have small parts, not good theater. No. Every small part contributes to the greater web of the story, and he's definitely a believer of that. We could probably spend 2 hours just talking about the characters by themselves. So I'm going to give you the 5 main characters and throw in a bunch of small characters as I'm talking about the summary as well. Just understand that, like, even though there's quite a few spoilers in this summary, this is still a deep skeletal outline. I mean, this is just like the barest of bones I could do. This is the original was what, 825 pages, something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah. So it's
824. You were almost exactly correct.
Well, that's because I listened to an interview with Clive Barker from the 90s talking about the book, talking about it, and how he spent, and so this is like, I mean, some authors are like
delightful, by the way.
They are. They're fantastic. But, he talked about his writing schedule was 14 months, and it was 8 a.m. to usually around 10 to 11 p.m. every day, 7 days a week. He said with Imajica, he didn't even, have company over for, 14 months.
Yeah,
so,
that's about right.
He's a little, which is why it's such an immersive and incredible experience. Also the writing in here is like poetry. It is one of the most beautifully and terribly written, like terribly as in dark.
Yeah.
Beautiful darkness I've ever read.
Yeah. I mean, there are moments in it that are genuinely distressing. I
Yeah.
don't care how many times you've read them. It's hard to read.
Yeah, it is there. Yeah, there's a couple of scenes in there, and you're like, oh, I need to skip this, or I need to, but you have to you just have to get through it.
Yeah.
He does not pull punches ever on anything, which I can appreciate because what is good fiction, what is good writing, but to tell the truth,
Yeah.
as horrible as that truth might be sometimes. Um, so all right, so a quick world overview to understand. This is a fantasy book in a lot of ways, and the world in which we're talking about as a whole is called the Imajica. Earth is one part of the Imajica. However, it has been disconnected, and so it's not reconciled with the other four dominions. They call them the five. The five dominions make up the Imajica. Earth is the fifth dominion, and three of the other dominions are basically just other worlds like Earth, but with a host of different kinds of creatures and civilizations. And in kind of a funny way, the Earth kind of secular stuff kind of becomes kind of pop cultural interesting, almost like the occult does here on Earth, to them. So they have like these really strange cars that clearly are attempting to be like Earth-based cars, but are strikingly different, almost like Mad Max sort of creations.
The names.
The names.
Random words from the fifth dominion become popular names over there.
Right.
Like a character that, I'm sure we'll discuss, but hoi polloi.
Hoi polloi.
Like
Yeah.
they end up with names like this.
Yeah, or huzzah is another one.
Tick.
Tick. Tick raw.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Hi, oh, pa. Yeah.
you get these names where it's like, okay.
You're like, what? Yeah, but the point is that the Dominions 2, 3, and 4 are pretty obsessed with the pop culture of our world. The unfortunate thing is that the only way you can get from our world into theirs is to be a powerful maestro, which is their version of a sorcerer.
Or to have a way station.
Yeah, or a way station. But that had to be built by a maestro.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, so some of the maestros built way stations. There's one in the book that one of the characters uses. Yeah. Oh, well, the whole family uses throughout the generations or whatever. It's also the second, third, and fourth are ruled by someone in the beginning who is mysterious called the Artok, and his empress. So basically an emperor and empress, which they become very important characters later on. The first is basically where God is. And God's name in this is Hapexamendios, and it's also kind of important to listening to this interview from Clive Barker. He's like, I wanted to, all these fantasy stories base a lot of their mythology on ancient Greece or, the Norse or even like the Hindus. I wanted to base it on Christian mythology.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a twist on Christian mythology. And Jesus is actually kind of an important historical figure in this.
Yes.
That comes up. We'll get to that a little later. But the god's name here is Hapexamendios, also known as the Unbeheld. And he's very much a patriarchal god. He is definitely a stand-in for the Abrahamic religions in a lot of ways. In this world, the goddess powers have been suppressed by Hapexamendios. 3 of the major goddesses are imprisoned or trapped by Hapexamendios at some point. And that becomes important later on. 3 is literally he opens the book with this discussion of all stories are only really told with 3 characters. Yeah. He loves to do stuff like that. All of his openings to books are like plays.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. Weaveworld is my favorite novel, and it's the same thing. He opens it very much like a play, like the narrator telling you the beginning of the story. The other important key here is that there is kind of a mystical barrier between the first dominion and the second. So you can't really get to the first. That's where God is. No one knows what's really there. There's this kind of place called the Erasure. It's like this strange fog that if you wander into it, you never come back.
Yeah.
And no one knows why. But there are some people who will sit at the edge of the Erasure and claim it has all kinds of healing powers and properties. There's one character who does appear to be healed by it, and that becomes a key and important ingredient later. Some important characters. So I'm going to give you five. Two are lesser important, but because three are the most important. But two are a legacy of a family that directly tie in. The first one is Gentle. His full name is John Zacharias Fury, but he largely goes by Gentle. He's an art forger, so he like takes classic works of art and like makes them up, and he's a fake. Like,
yeah, he's an art forger and a gigolo. He's a fuckboy.
Yeah, he absolutely is a fuckboy. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, and unfortunately, he goes around breaking people's hearts. He mysteriously doesn't know anything from 10 years further than 10 years in his past.
Yeah.
And so he's missing a lot of memory. He doesn't really know how old he is. And that becomes, of course, an important theme as well. But I think a key theme here with him is that he is a fraud. Like everything he does is kind of fraudulent or fake or not real, disconnected, disillusioned. All those different kind of terms. Then there's Judith. And Judith is, she's on the outs and outs of a marriage. And like right in the beginning, she has just left her husband. She's a former lover of Gentle. They have some weird, long, complicated relationship. She too only has about 10 years of memory, so you can kind of suspect right away something is going on between the two of them.
Yeah.
That, again, she doesn't know how old she is, but she's like everybody's muse. So she goes and she always just hang out with the cool people or the artists or the wealthy, and she kind of gets like a lot of her experience and satisfaction of being like, the almost like a possession of these artists or like rich people or various other things.
Yeah, well, in the beginning, I'd say it's like she's looking for a place to belong, which again becomes important later.
Absolutely. Then there's Pi Opa. And Pi Opa is kind of the third main character of this story. You meet him in the beginning as an assassin. Very quickly you find out he's also a prostitute. You do find out much, much later that neither of these were actually his choice, but kind of a magical command.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for him, he's kind of stuck choosing either being a whore or an assassin. But Pi is also not human. Pi is from the second dominion. He's been kind of hiding out in our world because we start in our world. And you don't really find out until much later as to why. But he's a creature called a mystiff.
Yeah. So he is actually incorrect. Well, it might be correct for the moment for some other people, but the mystiff is, in current parlance, would probably be they. Often it is used, but the mystiffs are a specialized third sex of their species.
Yeah. They're very rare too.
Very rare.
Only
very
one
rare.
born in a generation.
Yeah.
So he may be the last one, essentially. There's some speculation later that maybe some have wandered off and are still alive because they don't really age exactly. But yeah, they or it is kind of interchanged. He is used in the beginь.
Yes,
in the very beginning. Initially.
Yeah, because of, again, how
he is an assassin.
Yeah. How Pi Opa is perceived. Part of the power of their particular sex is they are perceived like filtered through people's desires. So this also means that even from early on, sometimes Pi is referred to as she, depending on who's looking.
Yep.
Which is
whoever looks is the one. And what I mean, this is 1991 too, right? I mean, obviously there's a lot of stuff in the 60s and 70s that came up to talk about gender and sexuality, but like Clive Barker is like really tearing off the band-aid of like our gender constructs here and is like, the gender of Pi is whatever you want it to be.
Yeah.
That's really the approach that Pi is, because, and so there is one point when Gentle's like, but what do you look like really? And Pi like reveals themselves to have like a totally different like sex organ that's not really describable exactly.
Yeah, and
or comparable.
The fact that I also like that Clive Barker actually explores how uncomfortable people are with this. You know, it's like, it's great. Like like, okay, does this make, are you weird about this? Well, that's something you're going to have to work on, isn't it?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, like, I
Yeah.
mean,
Well,
obviously he doesn't say that in the book exactly, but that's very much the message that comes across.
and there's a lot of erotica in this book. Pie is a part of some of that.
Yeah.
Some of it's traditional male female. Some of it is queer. I mean, it just it's all over
It's all
the
over the
place.
place.
Yeah, it's all over the place. So I guess some of those people who like romantasy, if they like the really dark stuff, they might like this.
If you're okay with your romantic sex scenes being blended with body horror, this is a good book for you.
Yeah.
If that weirds you out a bit, still maybe read it, but be ready.
Yeah, just prepare yourself. And then there's two other characters. And at first you don't know they're brothers, but you figure out about a quarter way in they're brothers. The first is Charles Esterbrook. This is Judith's now ex-husband. And he orders a Pie to assassinate Judith. That's how the book begins, with this meaning of hiring Pie the assassin. And then there's Oscar Godolphin. The actual name of Charles is Godolphin.
Yeah.
But I forget why he took he wanted to hide his identity or something.
Yeah, it's just one of those, like, I don't want to be known by my family name.
Right, but
so.
I forget how he picked Esterbrook. It does talk about it, but
it does, but yeah.
It's one of the million little details he gives you.
There's a lot of detail.
A lot of detail. And Oscar is Charles' brother. He's an important member of an organization called the Tabula Rasa. The Tabula Rasa is important to mention because they are the people who try to suppress magic and the occult because they know some of it's real. Because leading up to this story, 200 years before the story begins, someone tried to reconnect Earth to reconcile the fifth dominion with the other four, and it went horribly wrong.
Yes.
Horribly wrong. Like magic backfire, like people were murdered.
Yeah,
all
many
kinds of
people
stuff.
died.
Many people died.
Yeah.
So the Tabula Rasa forms right after that event to try and destroy any magic from anyone trying to play. They're basically saying, like, you're not allowed to play with fire.
Yeah.
And so at the
Which
same...
I actually like about the Tabula Rasa is they're not a villainous organization. Like, you end up disagreeing with them and they're kind of unlikable, but you completely understand why they exist.
You do when you finally find out why they exist.
Yeah.
You don't find out until
pretty far along.
2/3 of the way through. And then
you're like,
I can understand why you would want to ban all magic because you just saw your friend turned inside out by a strange creature from another dimension.
Yes.
Like it's like opening the gateways in the wrong way can potentially and there's also an in-between realm called the Anovo, which is super important as well. But it's kind of like the fluid in which the dominions sit. And sometimes if you screw up a crossing, you can get trapped there. And all manners of terrible creatures essentially live in there.
And if they get brought out of the Anovo, it doesn't go... It's not good.
No, they're just basically mouths with huge stomachs that just wanted to consume everything. Most of them. Innocent people sometimes get trapped in the Anovo. In fact, Piopa was at one point trapped in the Anovo, and it is a maestro who frees him. So another thing about Oscar that's super important is that actually he's kind of betraying the society. He is behind their back. Traveling, he has a gateway or a way station to the second dominion. Second dominion, correct?
Yeah, to the second.
Yeah.
To the fourth, third, second. Yeah, so fourth dominion.
Because it's in Shakwa.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, which is a city in the fourth dominion. And then there's Exonerex, which is the city in the second dominion, which is like the capital city of the three dominions that are reconciled. And so, Oscar is basically selling human culture over there and making a killing and then bringing back magical objects and all kinds of stuff from his travels. And he's, the society would not only excommunicate him, they would probably kill him if they found out he was doing this. Because they really have no tolerance. And at this point, they have this tower, and this tower in the basement has this huge, expensive library of all the ancient occult works. Why they just don't burn them, I don't understand. You'd think they would just destroy the books, but that's a...
I mean, given how the physical... Elimination of the physical does not necessarily mean elimination of the real.
Yeah, right.
And so that might be why keeping things imprisoned is sometimes safer than attempting to destroy.
Right. And and they also happen to keep a goddess in the basement.
Yes.
Although
Well,
only one of them knows it, though.
a person touched by divinity.
Yes, person touched by divinity. She kind of is. She's
Kind of.
semi-divine. Semi-divine.
Yes. Yes. Also nuts.
Yes. Also totally batshit crazy because she's been imprisoned for
200
years. So, all right. Also there's Dowd. Oh, I guess I have a couple more than characters.
God.
Dowd, which is a created being. He's created by a maestro. Was he created by Satori? Who was he created by? I always forget. He's a creative being, and he has. He's basically like a servant slash like assassin of his own right.
He's created from something of the Inovo.
Yeah.
So there's a real, just a fundamental nastiness to him.
Yeah, he is not a nice creature. He does all the Godolphin family. He's like magically bound to the Godolphin family. And so he has had to live through generations of their service. He is a magical being, and so he's not really killable exactly, or at least not easily. It's complicated. Then there's two other beings I wanted to mention: the Artok and Quasar. Quasar is the Empress.
Yeah.
And they're the rulers of the second, third, and second,
all
third,
pronunciations or approximations, by the way. There's like 14 letters to some of these names. So.
Yeah, and I did do the audiobook, and so Clive Barker did consult, so that helps.
Like Quaiswag or something like that, and then he's Ordorix, and it's like literally some of these names are like
3 X's in the
name. Sure. How do I handle this? I'm not really sure.
Good old fantasy names, right?
Yeah.
All right, so the story. So we're 20 minutes in and we're just getting to the story. Sorry. But, huge book. Okay, so I'm going to just try to get through this really quick. You jump in if I miss anything super critical. This is just the critical stuff. There are a lot of side adventures. Every side adventure does actually matter. He doesn't give you... It is a long book, and sometimes you are like, do we really have to go here? And then you get like another 50 pages, you're like, yes, we did have to go there. It actually does make sense for this event to have happened because it changed the character's mind about this one particular thing. So we're just, again, as bare bones as we can get here. So Charles Estabrook hires the assassin Pio Pa to kill his now ex-wife Judith. Pi flies to New York to try and kill Judith. She's in Bloomingdale's. He tries to kill her on a curb. She successfully thwarts it with her help from kind of her current boy toy a little bit. I mean, he kind of helps to intervene a little bit. It's mostly Judith who gets out of it. But the attempt fails. Charles actually then feels bad, and calls up Gentle and is like, hey, Gentle, ex-lover of Judith, I made a boo-boo. I might have sent a hired killer to kill Judith. And he's like, can you please help and stop? So Gentle then flies to New York to try to put a stop to it. And he does, in fact, stop the second attempt. But as he does, he and Pi kind of catch each other in each other's sight.
Well, and I will say what's interesting is the first attempt, she manages to fend off, but also, Pio Pa says her name and appears to recognize, in a wait, what?
Her.
And then
Judith?
The second time, it's actually not clear if it's even genuinely an assassination attempt.
Right.
Or if Pio Pa is just trying to see her.
Right.
And be like, hey.
Yeah.
It's very vague on that, which is
Yeah, he shows up at the door and then and she even says after, she's like, it was strange. It was almost like he wanted to talk to me and not really kill me, and I recognize him for some reason.
Yeah. And again, the these early hints
that they have some sort of interconnectedness.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that it might seem a little obvious, but the sheer depth of it is not obvious.
Not yet. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff in Barker's novels that is the first third of the book, and you're like, why is he talking about this? And then later you're like, oh, okay.
The man does not waste a plot point.
He does not waste a plot point. So but afterwards, a gentle kind of thwarts it, but he gets a really good look at Pi, and they're like staring across the street at each other, and it's like pouring rain, and he talks about it being like this like river of memory between us or something, and then Pi flees, and then that night, who he thinks comes to his hotel room is Judith, but it actually turns out that it's Pi, and so Pi actually takes the form of Judith and has sex with Gentle, and then almost towards the end of it, Gentle realizes it's not Judith, freaks out, throws Pi out, but almost doesn't throw him out because he's like, wait, what? What was this? How did you do that? Like, what is this magic
What is
stuff you're
happening?
doing? What is happening? How are you able to shift shapes like that? Right? So throws him out, but then he can't stop thinking about him. He goes back to New York. Judith goes back to New York.
Back to London.
I'm sorry, London. Right,
Yeah.
London. They go, well, yeah, like the
Yeah, they
to
both.
England.
Yeah, they both go back to London, to England. I think they both go back to London proper, as I recall, more or less.
Yeah, they have most of their life is in London proper at this point. I think.
Yeah, London and the near suburbs for the most part. Yeah, and actually, part of what spurs Judith to go is she calls Gentle while Piopa is in the hotel room with him, and like so he like
And he
picks
picks
up
up the
phone
phone because
but
he's
then
half aware.
yeah, and then but then like puts it down so she gets to hear him with someone. She's like, you know what, screw you, buddy, I'm going back home.
Yeah.
You know, like she's just mad and
Right. She's
heads
like,
back and
Gentle's disappointed me yet again because
Yeah.
he basically cheated on her multiple times. One of the key themes here is Gentle's insatiable lust.
Yeah.
He is just obsessed with women and obsessed with his lust, and he just cannot control himself. And literally all the problems of the book really are created because of Gentle's lust. At the same time this is kind of going on, there's this meeting with the Tabula Rasa, and they're trying to figure out, there's been these strange happenings around London, and they're also worried because this coming summer, it starts in like basically around the new year. It starts a little bit before Christmas in the book, and then it kind of transitions and goes throughout the year. But they know at the height of summer, at the summer solstice, will be the first time in 200 years that the reconciliation is possible. So the Tabula Rasa are getting nervous because things are happening. So they summon Dowd, because they don't know Dowd is a magical creature. They just know they can't get a hold of Oscar. He's a pain in the ass to get a hold of. He always seems to be out. He never comes to meetings anymore. So they call Dowd, who's a servant, and Dowd shows up and is, he's, of course, Dowd talks about how he has been an actor in many ways throughout the centuries and has learned, because he doesn't actually understand human emotions, but he knows how to act them out.
Yeah. So he does a very convincing performance for them, because that's what he does.
Right. And then, he then tells Oscar, as soon as Oscar comes back, it turns out that Oscar is hanging out in the Dominions on another one of his trips. And so then Oscar appears to the Tabula Rasa, and they're accusing him of betraying the society. They start getting all suspicious of him. They start asking questions, and he just calls Dowd in and like literally stabs Dowd a bunch of times and then guts him. Disembowels him in front of everybody on a table, and shows him that he's actually not human. He doesn't have human organs or anything like that. Dowd is pissed, but like later he's pissed, but he's like really no worse for the wear. He just thinks it's embarrassing to have happened.
Yeah. Physically, like he doesn't suffer the way normal beings do. Like,
it doesn't even seem like he has pain.
Yeah, he doesn't really feel pain. He just knows he's supposed to react. Like most of his reactions when he's being disemboweled are out of rage and humiliation.
Right. And so he is humiliated, but Oscar also convinced the Tabula Rasa people that in fact this creature was placed who knows when in my midst.
Replaced my
manservant. Clearly, we're all being infiltrated. You should watch out for yourself. He's so suspicious among the Tabula Rasa to kind of redirect the issue. And then they kind of go crazy and basically order every occultist in the greater London area to be murdered by their organization in preparation for the reconciliation to prevent it from happening again. Judith returns to London after finding out about all this, not about the tabula rasa. But she goes to talk to, like, why did you try to kill me, all this other kind of stuff. He's trying to call her and get a hold of her. He ends up in Charles ends up in a psychiatric facility, essentially saying like he's had a nervous breakdown or whatever. She does go and visit him because she kind of wants her stuff back and kind of wants answers. And and he's like begging for forgiveness and begging her to come back to him. It's like, no, I just tried to have you killed, but it was out of love, I promise. So
take me back.
but so she goes back to his place and starts searching through his stuff and finds a bunch of magical objects in his safe.
Yeah.
She basically goes into his safe and she finds this one blue stone, which is a super important object, which in like in the beginning of the book, you're like, what the hell is this stone? But she touches it and it like turns her whole body blue and she astral projects actually into the Tabula Rasa tower and sees that there's someone trapped under the tower. Someone who has been there for a long time that shouldn't been there. And so Judith is like now had this experience. It shakes her to the core. She like throws a little stone and kind of forgets about it for a huge amount of the book. And then, but this question of what was this magic stuff, in the same way that Gentle gets obsessed with it, she gets obsessed with it. Gentle becomes so obsessed with Pi that he basically ends up tracking him down. Pi, for better or worse, lives in what's basically a trailer park with Roma people. That's kind of where he's selling his services one way or another. But in order to kind of cover up everything that's going on, Oscar orders Dowd to go and kill his brother's would-be assassin, not even knowing that the Mistiff is involved, because Dowd didn't really have a clue that it was the Mistiff, and neither did Oscar, and they all know of the Mistiff. Like, they don't maybe necessarily directly know of him, but he is famous for important reasons later. And in that, so he burns it down. Gentle is there. He's trying to like help save kids, and this is kind of like the first before this I kind of hated Gentle. He's kind of like kind of a selfish. He's a fuckboy. He's a piece of shit. And this is when he like goes out of his way to like save a dog and then save a child and like really try to help. And you're like, okay, he does have some humanity in him.
Yeah.
Even if he's kind of an asshole most of the time. And eventually, Pi, he sees Pi and Pi runs out. He thinks that Pi is maybe dead, but Pi ends up coming to him, and together, I'm really glossing over a lot here. Together, Gentle says, I want to know everything. Please teach me everything. Tell me all about your magic. Take me to the Dominions. So, him and Pi create this kind of interweaving. It's like a semi-sex spell almost, where they kind of interlock their bodies and they actually open a doorway to the fourth Dominion and kind of begin a journey there. Okay, so sorry, there's just so much here.
It's a massive book.
It's a massive book. So they begin this kind of journey through the fourth, and originally like it was kind of just like let's go on a tour of all the dominions and all this kind of stuff, but things escalate very quickly.
Yes.
They're spotted in the outskirts of the city of Padashakwa. And they are this kind of like officiant there, and one of his executioners, which is a Nalyanak, one of those like creatures with the little hands with a little fire between it that can basically execute people with will magic. Start chasing them and tracking them down. They manage to escape to the countryside, and they Pi is like, we can't go to Padashakwa. We need to go somewhere safe. So let's go to the next dominion. So they start on their way up through the mountains. They stop in this mountain town, and unfortunately, just their presence alone, just the word of their presence gets the whole town slaughtered. They escape into the mountains, and this is like 100 pages of summarizing.
Loosely speaking, just for important context, is the Autarch is conducting raids and purges, like basically like any
rebellion is imminent.
Yeah, and so like to suppress, any kind of subversive thought or whatever. Sometimes towns are just wiped off the map.
Yep. Yeah.
And
He's a fascist. The Artok is a fascist government,
yeah,
and
he's pretty horrible.
He's really horrible. Really horrible, and it gets even horrible the more you know. So anyway, they flee into the mountains because they're going to try to get to the third dominion, where Piopa has a friend named Skopik who is supposed to help them along the way. What you don't realize so much later is that Pi has a very particular agenda. He's not just doing this for shits and giggles, have fun time with Gentle, but it has to do with Gentle's memory. So he's like trying to reintroduce him to all these important people and sites. But they get up into the mountains. They have these creatures that are roughly llamas. It was kind of just the way they were described, like high altitude camelids of sort. I mean,
something like that.
Yeah. But they meet people along the way. There's some interactions. But ultimately they get trapped in a terrible blizzard. They run into like this ice block. And this ice block has a bunch of women trapped in it. And then, they end up going back and make a camp in this nearby cave. And then in the middle of the night, Gentle wakes up and kind of discovers or rediscovers the first power he has, which is called Numa. It's where he can like blow his breath into his hand.
And he did use it before, but not on this scale.
Right.
Because it was used both for the crossing into Fourth Dominion, and also that's how he killed the Nilyanek.
Yeah.
And an important note about where they are is it's known to be one of the resting places of Hepexamendios on his journey through. Like, this is a place where this god had stopped and
the male
did
god.
what it did.
Yeah. And trapped these women in the ice.
Yeah.
So these women are trapped in the ice, and in the middle of the night, he doesn't even know why he does it. In fact, he thinks it's a dream. But he goes totally butt-ass naked into the freezing blizzard and uses the Numa, blows it into his hand, and starts smashing on the ice. And the women he helps the women break free. And they go free, and like he inadvertently doesn't realize that one of them is a goddess, and he kind of frees her from it. He kind of does that a lot. He ends up freeing 3 goddesses inadvertently. He doesn't really realize what he's doing until long after. But then he wakes up the next morning. It's like, oh man, Pi, this crazy dream. He's like, wait, that was real? Because he's got like frostbite.
Yeah, and his hands are all
and his hands are
up and like
right. So he's like in a lot of pain, and Pi's like, no, I think that really happened. So they go up and to where the women were, and they actually lead them through a passage into the third dominion. In the meantime, Judith is having experiences with now Oscar Godolphin. She ends up meeting Oscar through Charles and immediately kind of falls head over heels for Charles.
for Oscar.
For Oscar, sorry. Yeah. For Oscar, and kind of like leaves Charles behind. And they end up getting into actually like a huge spat and fighting, and Charles and Oscar kind of get in a fight at the way station, and Oscar thinks he leaves his brother for dead, but he does not, in the Fourth Dominion, and then comes back and then starts like a love affair with Judith. And Judith doesn't know why. She talks at great length about how this dude is like old and he's overweight, and I don't know why I'm so into him, but I really am.
Yeah. And it's very strange because she suddenly becomes very passive, which she really has never been before.
Right.
For all of maybe looking for a place to belong or some direction, she was never previously passive in any way at all.
Right.
And all usually
like a hard feminist, and like all of a sudden she's very passive with Oscar, and she doesn't understand why. Eventually she kind of snaps out of that and demands that he take her to the Dominions. She knows what he's doing. There is a moment when she tries to kind of go behind her back. It's like it's like a chapter, and she goes to the tower to try to find out about the goddess. She runs into a former member of the Tabula Rasa who everyone thought was dead or crazy, but then Dowd also has been following her, so he kills her and prevents her from doing anything more about the tower. Oscar imprisons her in her room, and that's when she kind of snaps out of it and is like, you know what, kill me or take me to the Dominions, one or the other. So he finally consents, goes to take her, gets it all set up, and then Dowd basically shoves Oscar out of the way and takes her to Padashakwa. And so Judith begins her entry into the Dominions, although that one is much more abbreviated, and she ends up pretty quick into the second Dominion. She really they kind of just jump forward. And suddenly she's now kind of wandering towards the Artox palace and kind of discovering things about herself.
Yeah, or actually, no, they land in Isordrex. That's why
They
she's
do land in Isordrex.
Yeah.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. So they land in the second Dominion, and so she's already on the scene. This is where Gentle is currently heading. While she's kind of doing the stuff with Oscar, and kind of getting him to take her over, Gentle and Pi end up in the third Dominion. They hear that their friend Skopik is something in some prison called the Cradle. They eventually go there. They steal a car to try to escape this other group because they get attacked again. They steal a car and they get out into this cradle, which is in the middle of it's a little island in the middle of the lake. So they start driving out, and all of a sudden, like the lake, which was previously solid, now becomes liquid, and so they fall into the water. Gentle actually falls deep in and basically goes into a coma. And he wakes up. He has to basically like imprint his thoughts into Pi to keep them from putting him on a funeral pyre. And he does, and then he realizes he has like a terrible parasite that's like inside of him that was like the water was actually like a creature. It was like a monster. So like and it turns out it's actually a prison for yet another goddess. But so she's surrounded by these terrible creatures and can't get out. And so, so Gentle finally eventually coughs it up, finds out that Pi is kind of like sleeping with a prison warden, basically.
Yeah, essentially to get them preferential
treatment.
Right,
to get them preferential treatment. And turns out that like he's like, nope, this ain't gonna happen. So he proposes marriage. They get married. He marries the Mistiff and wants to see the Mistiff for like who the Mistiff truly is. And so they have that kind of moment. And then, of course, he's not getting favor anymore because he's no longer sleeping with the prison warden. So things start to go south. And then, of course, they send a report to the Art Talk, and so they know, we better get the hell out of here. They manage to escape the help with one of the guards who says, I'll help you if you take my daughter, Huzzah. So they escape with the daughter. On the way out, Gentle once again uses magic to attack and free himself, and then inadvertently frees the second goddess.
Yeah. And also the girl, Huzzah, she's been speaking to this goddess. She's
in dreams and stuff.
Yeah, she's got a gift, and so she's like, no, trust me, you're with me, she'll take care of us, like it, and she's right.
Right. So Judith then is in Exoterex, and pretty quickly the first thing she realizes, Dowd is kind of there and then not there. There's like several little adventures they have, but when she finally breaks off on her own, she sees the face of the Artok's wife, and it's her face. And she's like, what the hell? Does everybody have doubles in the world? Is this just a me thing? Like, what is going on here? Why in the world is this happening? And Dowd shows back up and actually like kind of forces her to recollect, and Judith realizes that she's basically a magical clone of this other woman. So and we'll get into that in a little bit here, but why? But she was created during the last attempt at the reconciliation 200 years before, and she was. I guess I might as well just tell you. Not yet.
I was going to say, don't get sidetracked now.
Yes. So she finds that out. So she realizes, and she essentially takes Quasar's place in some ways, and then gets there, and gets into the palace or whatever. Her Dowd and Quasar have a fight. Dowd has these little mites that he can kind of fling at you, and the mites will like undo you from inside. You only really see it once before this scene, like right in the beginning of the book. He does it to another magical
twice, because he does it to
to the other former Tabula Rasa member. So he uses these mites very sparingly. He doesn't have many of them to begin with. So he kind of undoes he tries to undo Quasar, but Quasar has her own powers and has like these ribbon things that come out of her and can attack, and she essentially pushes Dow down this deep well, and he like falls down. Like they say, it's like it's such a long fall that it's like they barely hear him scream or something like that. And so she's kind of freed. She goes back to the palace. Quasar has had her eyes put out by some revolutionaries who have rightfully blame her for the atrocities happening in the kingdom.
Because she is actually behind.
She's actually behind a number of these terrible
yes.
atrocities. So this other version of her.
She's developed a very peculiar religious mania.
Yeah, and she's actually looking for Jesus.
Yes.
She
looking
thinks,
for Jesus, but also somehow really into like tormenting the populace.
Yeah.
She's a really screwed up person.
She's.
I mean, it makes sense once you know the whole story, but
Right.
she's a really screwed up person.
She's deeply, deeply problematic person. But you know, she's gonna go flee, and then Judith has a dream in the palace. She goes to the palace, falls asleep on Quasar's bed, and has a dream, and the Artok is like, comes in, is like, I'm leaving, and she thinks it's Gentle, and so like they have sex, and then she wakes up the next day and is like, I need to go back. You know, or you need to figure out, the pivot. She wants to go see the pivot, and the pivot is like the kind of, I guess it's kind of like a part of the Godhead. It's very phallic.
Extremely.
A very phallic part of the Godhead. But it's inside the Artok's palace.
Yeah.
And there's like a listening area where you can kind of catch some of the prayers from people from all over
it gathers. It turns out it's actually like, I mean, it's an item of power in and of itself, but it's also kind of just an intelligence gathering device in some ways.
Yeah. So, also it turns out very quickly, not long after, that there is a goddess trapped inside in the pivot. But the pivot is like what gives the Artok this authority, because everyone's like, yeah, he might be a terrible monster, but no one be able to move the pivot into their palace unless they had the Hepexamendios, God's blessing. So Judith goes to see this and hears some messages, and it makes her realize she needs to go back to the Fifth Dominion. She needs to find Gentle again. They need to heal the dominions, this kind of thing. And at the same time, Gentle is moving into the Second Dominion. Their paths are intersecting. That's kind of what's happening here.
Yeah, at this point, he actually, is getting to the palace himself.
Right, and him and Pi get separated because Pi's people are like, hey, we see you, like, you need to come with us. And what Pi doesn't know, what Gentle doesn't know, and what Huzzah doesn't know is that actually they're really arresting Pi for basically abandoning his people, and so Pi ends up going on trial while Gentle's supposed to be waiting at this one spot. So Pi is undergoing a trial, and at the same time, one of the Nalyanak show up, and they kidnap Huzzah and do all kinds of terrible. It's the equivalent of rape, but it's a different kind of creature. So it literally gets pleasure from torturing people. So it's not much different.
It's very sad.
It's extremely sad. It's a
difficult bit.
it's one of those bits that I like, that I'm like, man, I should maybe just skip this through, but you really can't, because Gentle confronts the creature, fights it, and manages to kill it, but not before it kills Huzzah.
Yeah.
And Huzzah at this point had become sort of like a daughter to Gentle, and he really kind of loves her and is excited about her, and all this other stuff, wants her to be happy. And so it's like this kind of terrible, terrible loss for Gentle. It's really emotionally impactful, not just from the torture, but from the loss. So angry and frustrated and not knowing what happened to Pi, Gentle goes off to the palace, where he meets the Artok. And it turns out the Artok is, maybe you already guessed this if you didn't read the book, his double. And he's like, what the hell's going on here? So both he and Judith have doubles, and very quickly Gentle's memories start to kind of you start to get a little bit more of a return of the memory here. And he, because the art talk is like, hey, you remember what happened, remember how he was created, and he kind of tells them the whole background story. So it turns out that Gentle is one of the most powerful maestros in history, and that he was the one who tried to bring out the second reconciliation, or the reconciliation 200 years ago. And he failed because he had accidentally created a copy of himself, and his copy sabotaged him on purpose because he didn't want the dominions reconciled, because he wanted to seek his own power and his own fortune, and couldn't do that with the dominions reconciled. So he sabotaged like the spell. He replaced these two important stones. So Gentle figures that out pretty quick. But the way that his double is created is super messed up, and it's also the way that Judith is created. So the Godolphin, Joshua Godolphin, which is the great-grandfather of the living Godolphins, the Charles and Oscar, had this beautiful, incredible woman named Judith. And, so Judith was like the object of everyone's eye. She was considered the most beautiful woman in London, and Gentle's in love with her. But she's another man's.
Yeah.
So Gentle proposes that I make a copy so that we can each have one. I'll take the original. You can have the immortal copy, and he creates her in this magic circle.
Yeah, and the copy is specifically made to be smitten with
The Godolphins.
The Godolphins, like
Hence
she
the
is
passivity.
Yeah, she is intended to effectively belong to them.
Right. So yeah, so it makes
icky.
It's super icky. And what's even worse is that the reason that his double is created is because his lust becomes so bad that, like, she's not even fully conscious yet, and he rapes her, essentially. And in that moment when he's doing that, he acts, because
he's inside the magic circle.
He's inside the magic circle.
Yeah.
He copies himself, and the copy sees what's happening and sneaks away.
Yeah, and it's very importantly, it's a copy of himself kind of at his worst.
Yeah.
Like, really just himself.
All the worst instincts.
Just totally wasted, foisting himself on an unconscious woman, like, mad with power and lust. Like, this was the copy that was made of himself. And
in those days, he's kind of like everybody's golden boy. He is like the maestro, and magic is like, it's still in the world, it's still on Earth, it's still popular, at least in some circles. It's not super widespread, but people know it exists. And so he's like super famous, and so he's got all of these kind of like grand designs in his head and all this lust, and so the copy is made from the very worst parts of himself, and that ultimately becomes the Artok. And the Artok is like, hey, let's join forces and rule over Earth instead of reconciling it. And at this point, after having just lost Huzzah, after marrying and being in love with, like, basically a non-binary, non-gendered being, Gentle's changed a lot, and he's actually, like, becoming a decent human being, and he's like, no, I don't want to do that. They get into a fight, and then, the Artok flees. He tries to trap Gentle. Gentle uses his Enuma to kind of bust out, but, he's fleeing, and on the way he runs into Piopa, the Artok does, and basically stabs him. And it's a mortal wound.
Yeah, poisons him.
Yeah.
With essentially ill intent. It's just like an intent so malicious that it's literally poison.
It's undoing Pi. Like his being is like is starting to become undone. So of course Gentle runs in, finds Pi, and is like, I have to save him. He is also running into Judith at this point. He's like, hey, we have to get back. And Judith, tells him about the pivot. So he goes and I forget exactly when he goes and speaks to the pivot. But the pivot, which is actually like a goddess in disguise, is like, you must finish the reconciliation. So he gets this idea in his head, and all his memories come flushing back. And he's like, this is my father's work. This is literally what I was born for.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, he thinks it's Hephaximendios speaking to him.
Right.
Turns out maybe not.
I think it's the goddess. Although it could have been a Hephaximendios too, but it says it was a woman's voice.
Yeah. It's one of the but he kind of takes it as direction from Hephaximendios, because at this point everyone's still thinking that it's Hephaximendios who wants the reconciliation, which in some ways is true, but again, we'll get to that later.
Yeah. So he's gonna go back. But in the time first, Judith is gonna go back first. He's gonna meet her back there. He'll find her. But then the other problem is that Pie's dying. So he's like, well, he heard kind of through the grapevine that Charles was still alive and that Charles was healed by the erasure. So he takes Pie to the erasure, runs into Charles. They kind of briefly talk. He takes Pie out there into this kind of fog, and Pie starts to kind of dissipate even more. And there's this really heart-wrenching scene where Pie is like, I'm dying and there's nothing you can do about it. I could stay, but I'll be a shadow or a shade of myself. And so he's like, but if you love me, Gentle, let me go. So he lets Pie go, and it's like this heart-wrenching moment. And then Pie's like last words is like, if you reconcile the dominions, there might be a way back to me, kind of thing. So he gets this kind of thing in his head that like now his motivation is not just power and fame. He's also wants to reconcile the dominions for love. So they get back. There's a couple other characters along the way here. Like there's Scopeek. There is Father Athanasius. And right after he takes Pie with Father Athanasius. Father Athanasius is the one who married him in the prison, and him and Pie in the prison, by the way. But Father Athanasius is also a part of the rebel faction that's trying to overthrow the Artok, and also bring back the goddesses. So
and he's also a bit deranged.
He's a bit deranged. He's got stigmata. So his hands are like constantly bleeding off and on, and so he's kind of like a saint of Jesus essentially, but also is like very much about the goddesses. And he's kind
of. And then of course in the erasure he also meets I forget the Chickajikeen who turns out to be
one of his former students.
But he doesn't know that at the time.
He doesn't know that till like the very end.
Yeah, but
really.
It's this one person who, even in the depths of the erasure, is able to sit there and stay completely coherent.
And
he's
meditate
not fading
power. Yeah.
And it's like, interesting. Who is this person?
Yeah. So, but he needs people to do the reconciliation. He needs someone to stand in every dominion. And Chickajikeen is going to do the first. Athanasius does the second. Scopeek does the third. Who does the fourth? Tick Raw. That's right. Tick Raw is another side character they met in the fourth, which is he's also a maestro, but he was like living in squalor, waiting for the reconciliation to begin. That's like his whole life was like waiting for the 200 years to pass. The maestros, by the way, have a spell that keeps them from aging. They don't age. I forget what it's called.
It's also like outside of a specific spell. It's just people of a certain
power.
Yeah, people of a certain power, people of a certain type, just kind of don't age.
Yeah.
And also in the reconciled dominions, people seem to live a lot longer anyway.
Right. Because through the flow of magic. Yeah. But Chickajikeen says he like didn't get the spell right for the de-aging, and there's like one line in there or one paragraph until he was like in his late 30s. So the best he could do is be in his late 30s forever. Yeah. I was like, oh darn. Wow.
Although in his case, it's like the way he's described, he's like a very standard like late 30s, kind of losing his hair. So it's like, oh, okay, I can see why.
He's balding and stuff. He's like, damn it, before I was balding. So anyway, they go back, but there's some problems because the Artok goes back. And his wife, how does she die? She dies somehow. She's crushed.
Yeah, she's crushed when the pivot falls apart.
Right.
She's crushed in the chamber.
The pivot falls apart because Gentle escaping from the tower uses the pneuma and basically sets the whole palace to crumble, and it also breaks the pivot, and he releases the third goddess at the same time. Oh man, we're already at an hour and we're not even done the description.
And Quasar gets crushed to death.
Yeah. So the Empress gets crushed to death. She's now dead. But they go back. Unfortunately, the Artok is back. Unfortunately, Gentle does not tell Judith that the Artok is an exact double.
Yeah, he says they resemble each other, but like makes it sound
like he's twisted.
Yeah, like you can tell there's something wrong with the guy. He's screwed up. Like, which is true, but you can't tell on the surface. On the surface, they look exactly the same.
Right. So unfortunately, Gentle, his first step back after he gets back into the Fifth Dominion is to go back to his old house where he had done the reconciliation before, which is in like this emptied out neighborhood. Probably empty. I think it's empty. emptied out because it's cursed from the bat magic backfire.
Yeah,
And
it's just one of those things where like you get the sense that over the years people just were like, I
we're
don't live,
not going near this
just don't
house.
don't live there,
Yeah.
you know.
So the whole neighborhood is like empty. So he goes back there, and the Artok, which he's now calling himself Satori, which is actually Gentle's name, but he's taken on the name of Satori. So from here on, we'll call him Satori. So Satori set a trap for Gentle of this creature that would basically keep him in the house and not allow him to do the reconciliation by basically forcing because Gentle had lived approximately 18 lives since he had asked Pi to actually fracture his memory because he was so disappointed about the failure of the last reconciliation. So Pi did that, and he gave him the same curse that Judith had, which was you can only remember 10 years, which is long enough to be a functional human, but not enough to really get the depth and understanding of your reflection. And so he gets trapped and like confused as to which life was what, and they're all kind of overwhelming. And he wanders out to the streets and becomes basically a homeless person and ends up living with them. In the meantime, Satori has taken over Gentle's life, is now like pretending to be him, has this crazy magical sex with Judith.
Like I said, if you're into like romantic sex scenes that are also body horror, this is your book.
Where they're like swallowing. It was like
what the actual hell? Yeah.
well, it's like an Ouroboros. Is kind of what I thought of as.
It's
Like the snake eating its own tail.
Yeah.
But they're doing it to each other, where they keep consuming different parts of each other and
Yeah.
stuff. But she ends up pregnant with his child, and that's an interesting and unfortunate circumstance.
Yeah.
When she very quickly realizes that he is not Gentle.
Yeah.
She figures out pretty quickly that he's not Gentle. And I'm glossing over a lot because we're going on an hour here. But I guess at this point I don't even need that anymore.
Well, and it's around things start happening pretty quickly. So the person in the cellar of the tower is freed.
Yeah. So Judith goes down with Dowd.
Dowd, yeah, because Dowd still isn't
dead. And they go down, and Dowd appears in the tower, and Oscar actually comes. So she goes back to Oscar. Oscar takes him to the tower. She basically says, like, you help me right now because you've done all this damage. So she takes him in there, and then Dowd is actually waiting, now that I remember correctly. Yep. Dowd is waiting, murders Oscar.
And has embedded his flesh with pieces of the pivot.
With the pieces of the pivot.
Which is kind of the only reason he's still going, because it gives him power.
Yeah, it gives him power. So he's got parts of the pivot, part of the godhead, but he's also really, really slow. Like he's part of his skin is stone now, right? And then Satori shows up at the same time, right as they're freeing Celestine, who is this woman who has been touched, and that is when you realize that Celestine is in fact Gentle's mother. That he was divinely conceived. That's why he's the most powerful maestro of all time. Actually, he's not the first one either. It turns out that this also happened with Jesus. So Jesus actually was a failed reconciler as well. They go into a little bit of the mythology here. That Jesus, instead of reconciling, kind of got crucified on accident. That the politics kind of caught up with him before he could finish the reconciliation of the fifth. And
although, as we find out later, perhaps that wasn't exactly how it happened.
Yeah. It's
he might have caught on.
He might have caught on. Yeah. That Jesus was like no slouch intellectually, and maybe he figured out that actually, well, you start to get the sense at this point that maybe the reconciliation is not so good, because it turns out that Celestine was raped by Apexamendios, that he's not such a good guy, that she just kind of.
And he may want the reconciliation for not great reasons.
For not great reasons. So Judith is starting to get this narrative, and meanwhile, one of Gentle's friends, Clem, and we haven't mentioned him up to this point, but he's kind of a side character earlier in the book, then disappears through most of the book. He's a gay man who also was in love with his friend. His lover dies before Gentle heads out to the Fourth Dominion, and so they have like this long-standing relationship. They've been friends forever, and so Clem, who actually is like the way he's dealing with his grief is working with the unhoused, runs into Gentle and Gentle's memory is just fucked. I mean, it's gone. And so anyway, he is like hanging out with this guy Monday, who is also an artist, and they're doing graffiti art, but the graffiti art is the Dominions, and it's
Yeah.
all over the walls, all over parts of London. They're doing these incredible artwork scenes and murals of all the different things, and it's like Gentle's like working through stuff, and it's Clem who finally kind of snaps him out of it. He goes back and he's like, shit, Satori set a trap for me. Satori's here. I gotta get back to this. So he kind of he gets Monday, he gets Clem, and Clem actually at that point fuses with his former lover. His former lover actually comes in, like his spirit comes into his body, and they become like this dual angel, guardian angel of Gentles of sorts.
Yeah.
It gets real complicated. Satori also kind of flees and goes and hides because he's just found out that like this Celestine is technically his mother too, even though he's a clone. He's a copy of Gentle and was rejected by Celestine. So Celestine, Judith brings him to the house where Gentle used to perform the spells, and they all kind of get back there. But then Judith has a dream, and it's kind of a disturbing dream where she's like, maybe we shouldn't be doing the reconciliation. Something's not right.
Yeah.
So Judith disappears, and before she does, she says, Gentle, don't do the reconciliation till I get back. Something's not right. It's not safe. And then takes off. And then she goes up this kind of magical river and actually finds the three goddesses that Gentle has inadvertently freed. And they tell kind of this really important detail to her. They say, well, yeah, it was Apexamendios who imprisoned the goddesses. It's actually the goddesses who made the world, not Apexamendios. It's the divine feminine. So she's like consorting with them, and she's like, but there's something in all of his knowledge that Apexamendios doesn't understand. The Imajica is a circle. And this is like a super important plot point. So she goes back, but they kind of temporarily, one of them invades Gentle's mind and the mind of all the other sorcerers throughout the Imajica who are going to stand at the reconciliation. And they make sure that their intentions are good. And they say, okay, well, go ahead with the reconciliation. I think the intentions are good. But as Gentle initiates the spell, you have Satori build an army of these terrible creatures. What are they called again? They're like these lion sort of creatures.
Yeah, I forget what the heck they're called.
But they're really powerful. But he sacrifices an innocent like, I don't know, she's like 15 or something.
Yeah,
he like kidnaps her and then cuts her open and he opens the Inovo and summons these creatures, these terrible monsters, and to come and basically ruin the second attempt at the reconciliation. So he's like coming on, and Gentle's like waiting for Judith, and the days, like if they don't finish by midnight, it's it's kind of like a beat the clock sort of scenario. So he goes and does it. And like actually Satori gets there and he's like, I realize actually what's going on. You don't understand it. That actually the reason that Apexamendios wants us to reconcile the fifth dominion is because he wants to destroy everything. He hates all life on these dominions. He wants to wipe all 5 clean, or all 4 clean, right? Because he obviously wants his own godhead to still rule.
Yeah.
And so Satori is like actually forces Gentle to finish the reconciliation. In the meantime, Judith and Celestine kind of interrupt, and Celestine is like Celestine basically like goes and Gentle's beaten almost an inch of his life by Satori and is laying like basically broken at the bottom of the stairs with Clem looking over them. And Judith and Celestine intervene, and Celestine's like, I've got an idea. I think we can stop this. And so Celestine like basically tells Gentle, who's like beaten near an inch of life, she's like, you must like astral project and go speak with your father. Delay as long as possible. So he does. With the last like gasp of his breath, he projects his spirit out, finally goes to Apexamendios, sees the godhead, confronts him, and he says, I want to see your face, father. Like, because Celestine says, flatter him, flatter him, flatter him. And then, like, doesn't know why, but he kind of inadvertently brings up Celestine. I've met Mother, so, like, I have some of her features, some of her person. And Apexamendios just gets really, really raging mad at the idea that she is still alive. It's like an affront to him. And then he says, oh, God, it was like, what was the line? He was like something like, you cannot build with love. love is a distraction from everything. And so he like hates that he had to like, impregnate this woman, and he gets so angry, and he sends like his most powerful fire at her, but she's like already gone. And so, and right as like he sends the fire, Gentle's like, Father, you didn't know this, but the Imajica is a circle. And it goes from, because he sends it to the fifth dominion, it's naturally going to circle back around to the first. So he actually sends the divine fire, and the divine fire wraps back around and just obliterates God. It just vaporizes him.
Because the thing is, like, Hepexamendios is the first dominion. Like his actual
his body
self, his body is the whole thing.
The whole fifth, and it's a city. It's like an endless city that goes on. Like Gentle talks about it going on for miles and miles and miles and miles.
Yeah,
it's all him, and so it just obliterates, apocalypse style, the entire city, and that's the body of God. And so God, the patriarchal God, dies. Celestine kind of sacrificed her spirit, and she went riding with the wave of power, so that like the last thing she saw was the destruction of Hepexamendios, basically her rapist. And so the minions are reconciled, and unfortunately, in the last minute before the fire came, Gentle saw Pi trapped by Hepexamendios and saw the fire claim him too. And so Gentle, like, the dominions are reconciled. There starts being tourists from the other dominions to Earth, and Gentle just falls into a deep, deep depression. Judith decides to take off and go to the other dominions with Hoi Polloi.
Mm-hmm.
Hoi Polloi gets wrapped into this adventure at some point, but Hoi Polloi's from the fourth dominion.
Yeah, she's probably the closest to a true minor character we have.
Yeah, she's only kind of there for like minor commentary. But she actually travels with Judith, so Judith doesn't have to go alone, and Judith is getting increasingly pregnant. She ends up giving birth in the second dominion.
I think so, yeah.
And meanwhile, Gentle's like in a deep, deep depression. He doesn't have Pi, the love of his life. Yes, everything's reconciled. He recognizes that what he did was a good thing, but he's lost his love, and he's just in deep depression. And Monday, his kind of homeless artistic partner becomes kind of his right-hand man. This, kind of pushes him, and he finally, him and Clem decide, Monday and Clem like push him and like, let go on a journey. You wanted to make a map, and there's this kind of early in the story, he talks about how cool it would be to make a map of the 5 dominions.
Yeah.
So then Gentle then goes on, like, I guess it's like a couple year long journey, but it's very abbreviated. It's like the last 50 pages, so it's really 40 pages. So he goes on a journey and maps everything. And then he goes and finds Judith in the second and meets the baby, and the baby is like super powered. It's a girl. She's like telepathic and prophetic, and she's got the powers of, she's like second generation God, basically. Yeah. Right? Mixed with Judith, who is divine, who is created by magic as well. So superpower magic baby. But they have the little rock, which I didn't mention, but at one point Satori had stolen, and they had gotten it back. In the end, Judith got it back, and it was like super important. And the baby, who is now a toddler, insists on giving this stone to Gentle, and he's like, oh, fine, I'll take it. So they like, but he's like, at one point when they went to go and just look at what was left of God, he went there, and it was just rotting flesh. There was nothing but rotting, a giant, endless dominion, an entire dimension of nothing but rotting, disgusting, putrid flesh. And he's like, and Monday's like, well, we still have to go there to map it, even if it's just saying rotting flesh. We got to make sure it hasn't changed. So they go there, and sure enough, there's the rotting flesh. But like, he holds up the little stone, and a little bit of water comes out of it. But then the water starts like flooding out of it, and then finally he's just like, he throws it, and it just starts filling up, and it immediately becomes, I mean, not immediately, but it's becoming a giant sea. And he ends up standing on a peninsula, and he draws this little map, and like his last message is like, I forget, it was something like, we don't know what's going to come in this world, but you have to explore it. And as he finishes kind of the last inscription from his map, Piopa appears, and says, "Are you finished?" And he says, "Yes." And they walk out together. And but before he does that, he gives the map to Monday and he says, "Take this and spread it." Monday goes back to Clem, who is like he's like super depressed because now his partner has kind of left his brain and the dead have nowhere to go. They're just wandering spirits. And they said, so Clem is like, or Clem's partner, what was Clem's
Taylor.
partner? Taylor, that's right, Taylor. Taylor shows up again and it's like someone has opened the door. Someone has opened the door in the first dominion, and now all the wandering spirits of the earth, all the dead who have been wandering in kind of a purgatory since Apexamendios took power, are now free to go through the door. And that's where Gentle goes. Gentle goes through the door with Pi. Clem and Monday are like, okay, our mission is to go spread the word about the door, to spread the word about what happened, to give the map to everybody possible, to draw it in every place possible, and that's kind of how, and then eventually go through the door themselves, and that's how the book ends.
Yeah.
So, whew. It is a really beautiful and hopeful ending, and of course, me just describing it to you just does not give you the weight. We're at an hour 20 already.
Good Lord.
Good Lord. We are going to talk about themes, though.
Yes.
So stick with us if you, you go first. What are some things that really stood out for you?
Well, I mean, and this is actually something you see a lot in Clive Barker's work, but the way I summed it up earlier is, an incisive critique of toxic masculinity through the lens of epic fantasy.
Yeah. And horror.
And horror. And that's the thing about Clive Barker's work is he, while he has no problem with men per se, like there's a certain type of masculinity he's just not on about and has called it to account many times in his writing. Mm-hmm. He has always been very intent on, I guess, representing the underrepresented, but I don't think he necessarily consciously thinks of it that way. I think the way he phrased it once is like, there are so many people who already have a really hard time in life. Why would you make it harder? And I think that mindset causes him, combined with his own life experience, as a gay man, like he's going to be writing from the perspective of people that you don't usually get the perspective of, and he's always been that way.
Yeah.
But sure. Yeah, there's a certain type of patriarchy, a certain type of masculinity that he has no room for, and he it very much is dissected in this, and it is in all of his work. Yeah. Truthfully.
Well, if you think about what Hellraiser is about, it's about toxic masculinity, torture, and lust, and that's what ultimately destroys everything, right? So, and that's what the Cenobites are, the quest for power and lust. And lust is a huge theme in here, and it's really when Gentle stops seeking lust and starts seeking love and connection and settling down that he becomes a actual decent human being. And it's when he gives into his lust or he does things that he creates terrible magic that backfires, or
and he's certainly not anti-sex and not even anti-casual sex, just like it's the idea of someone else being an object, even if it's
the objectification.
Yeah, even if it's an object of great mystery and power, as women are to Gentle initially. As people, they're not quite there for him.
Right.
And it's through his evolution, there's not he starts seeing his partners or potential partners as actual people. And again, Clive Barker at no point is trying to say hey, don't have kinky casual sex or anything like that. That's fine. That part is fine. It's
the mistreatment.
Yeah, it's are you connecting with the other person as a person?
Right.
As opposed to just an object of desire.
Right. And you can see this even in the way he does the scenes. And the scenes where it's something beautiful. A lot of the really powerful scenes with sex are scenes that are based in love and connection and transformation. And it is these kind of scenes when they're in the prison And Gentle wakes up from his coma, his like magical coma, and realizes Pi has been objectified. Pi is like, it's not a big deal. I've been a sex worker for a long time. Like, whatever. Like, prostitution is normal for me. But like when he's like, no, I love you. We're not letting you objectify anyone objectify you anymore. I'm gonna make an honest person of you. And Pi is like ecstatic about that, and I mean, because it does, even when he's like, Pi is testifying in front of his people and potentially going to be like punished or executed, like he's like, he like, because Pi is basically Gentle's familiar at through most of the story here. He's like, he summons him from the Innovo. He's trapped. So he summons him there to help him perform great magic and great works. I think he kind of does it in some ways just to do it, almost. That's kind of the impression. You never get real full account of how Pi was summoned, but in the beginning, it's very clear that Pi is an object of deep interest for Gentle, but he's still objectified, and it's when he finally, submits to the love that he feels for Pi, and Pi, it's only Pi he can, in a way, it's like only him who he can love, because like he can't really objectify him in the same way, because Pi like is unlike anything and that he could have possibly found. So it's like the fact that he can take the form of his pleasure and his desire. Judith comments on that several times. That sounds like something Gentle would go after, but he doesn't want that. He wants the real experience. He wants Pi for his real form. And that when the first time they like make love, when they're finally married, it's like this incredibly beautiful scene. And yeah, his like genitals are very unusual and stuff, but like it is an incredibly beautiful and kind of romantic love scene, despite the literal physical differences. And so it's kind of love that kind of transcends that lust, because you realize that lust is a prison of masculinity, right?
Yeah.
And this is so true.
When you treat it like an end in and of itself,
right?
And again, like I said, it's like you got to be careful to not like get too sucked into the like pure love and romance, because it doesn't have to be that. It doesn't have to be that.
No.
Clive Barker has always come across as like I said, you can still have casual, kinky, goofy sex, but like, are you connecting with another human being?
Right.
Are you doing this with another person, or are you doing it to an object? And if you're doing it to an object, you're doing something wrong.
Right. And that's a lot of the critique in here. This whole book, it's so interesting. So he picks the kind of Christian mythology, but to kind of, and he's obviously doing it in a critiquing way. And in fact, one of the interviews I read, which I can't remember it was like some horror magazine, and he's saying, well, Weave World was my story that related to the Garden of Eden, which makes sense if you read Weave World.
Yeah.
Another incredible book. This one was the story of Christ the Redeemer, but with another level. And so he's kind of critiquing that, and there's kind of hints that Christ actually figured out that his father was a bastard, and was going to just basically destroy. So
and essentially derailed
derailed the reconciliation on purpose. But so all of this really though is about reconciliation with the self, because both Judith and Gentle don't really know who they are. They don't have a place in the world. They're kind of driven by this seeking of the outer to satisfy the inner. And I thought it was really hilarious, actually, that his name as the sorcerer was Satori, because that's an Eastern philosophy term for the cycle of death and rebirth. And this whole book is about cycles and circles and all, the different dominions all being interconnected. About he's lived 18 different lifetimes at one point, they say, essentially, because they're 10-year periods, right? So there's all these kind of symbols, and also there's this kind of, the whole story is kind of a map of reality, but a map of the self. And that made me, I don't know if you're familiar with the Bhava Chakra, the Tanka in Tibetan, and actually just Buddhism. So it's the Bhava Chakra. If you don't know, check it out. There's some really great, in fact, I will post a really great video in the comments here on YouTube. If you're listening to us on like another service at some point later, find the YouTube episode. But there's a great piece about the map of the Baba Chakra. There's this guy who like has a YouTube channel about maps. But the Baba Chakra is a map of Buddhist cosmology.
Okay.
And it shows like the different cycles of death and rebirth. And so when I saw Satori was his name, and the whole idea of reconciliation, the idea of the circle, this kind of idea of searching within, because at the end of the book, really what that door is, and they say this, is they're going, because they're like, where could the door possibly go? They say into the Imajica.
Yeah.
Into the inner realms. Not an outer realm. All the dominions are outer realms, but inside, into the center of the creation itself, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of actually what Buddhism is ultimately about, is that discarding Satori, the cycle of death and rebirth, to go truly inward.
Yeah.
And so, he's kind of like mixing in some mythologies here. There's a lot of stuff. I mean, of course, there's a lot of stuff references to like Babylonian stuff, the idea of like the Babylonian creation myths, where the world is created from the body of a god,
there's a few creation myths that use that one.
Yeah, there are a few. But there's a lot of like callbacks to some other mythology as well. But there's also he definitely is injecting some Eastern philosophy in here.
Yeah.
There's a number of references that if you didn't study Eastern philosophy, I've studied Eastern philosophy pretty extensively, you might not catch them.
Plus a lot of good old fashioned, Western European just paganism.
Yeah. There's also a lot of that as
Lots
well.
Of that.
Yes. He definitely is also drawing from like early 20th century, like Theosophic Society kind of stuff to model the tabula rasa, and Manly P. Hall and those kinds of guys.
Yeah. And also just when the previous reconciliation was, because the late 1700s, like the occult was huge. Like it was so fashionable.
Right.
It was there were so many high society types who also claimed to be sorcerers of some sort, or they would, conduct experiments with, magnets and crystals and all kinds of stuff. Like it was a whole thing. So it's really interesting that that's where he picked the previous reconciliation to be attempted.
Yeah, there's also lots of Trinity references, right? There's gentle Judith Pye, there's the three goddesses, there's three genders that are at the center of the story. There's lots of Trinity or trilogy, or three, the number three is there quite a lot. What was it? We can't go too naked into the world. We'd burn out each other's eyes. That's what Pye says at one point, right? So it's because Pye, there's a lot of talks about like masks and having to kind of the way that we wear masks. Obviously, that's probably a queer allegory for Clive Barker, having to spend a chunk of his life in the closet and then ultimately having to come out, right? So there's that kind of thing. But I think there's also like the mask of magic itself, the mask of power, of what it really hides underneath. Because when you finally do see the face of Hepexamendios, he's ugly. He's just like a really malformed baby.
Yeah.
And really it's kind of like, and I think it's almost like humiliating for Gentle to look upon the face of his God, the face of his father, his literal father. So there's a lot of those kind of themes of what's really going on behind the scenes, behind the mask. And unmasking, becoming your true authentic self is very much a theme here. And where you reconcile is where you become the authentic self. I think that was another very clear theme here.
Yeah.
Other thoughts?
Truthfully, it's going to sound funny, but in a way it's almost hard to talk about because the themes are so big. It's just like, these are, but it is a book that I highly recommend. Be prepared to get squicked out. I mean, it's Clive Barker. It's still Clive Barker. Clive Barker,
If you can't handle Hellraiser, you can't handle this.
Yeah, he's still going to aim to freak you out.
Yeah, he is. I mean, and I think there's like the artistry of upending expectations with disturbing content. Like some people are just like, "Wow, that's disgusting," and I just want to push it off. But it's like a challenge to cultural purity, right? So
Yeah, and
you're challenging.
it also always serves the story, which
He always is
is
serving the story for sure.
because earlier you mentioned Stephen King, and the thing is Stephen King, sometimes his gory bits don't serve the story.
They're
You
just
know, yeah,
gross.
they're just
Just
kind of thrown in, and I'm
yeah,
like, come on, dude.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and I say this as someone who has enjoyed a lot of his work, and
I love Stephen
I
King, but I
respect what
agree.
he's done. But yeah, there are just moments where you're like, why was this even here?
Yeah.
Like sometimes his writing makes me mad because of that.
And like, look, this book is like it's not even as long as it. It is like what 1,100 pages or something like that.
Something like that.
Something like that. So
Which, for the record, I hate that book a lot.
you don't like child orgies.
It was the sheer stupidity of the ending that got to me. That was
the ending did bother me.
The child
too.
orgy was gicky, but then like the ending was just so dumb.
Yeah,
I was
I
like,
know.
you made me slog through all this.
He
for
didn't.
This.
He didn't stick the landing on it. He sticks the landing a lot of times, but not on it.
No.
But
and I think that's part of the reason I love Clive Barker so much. Is like
he always
the squick
sticks
he always sticks the ending, and the icky bits always serve the story.
Yeah,
they are not for no reason. They really aren't.
Every word in this book is strategic. Like every word, deeply intentional. I mean, even the way he uses the word "the" sometimes is deeply strategic. There's nothing in here that is not. I mean, when I read this the first time. It was probably 2016, 2017, something like that. So I guess 9-ish years ago. And I remember finishing it and being like, "What just happened to me?" Like his books. Every single one of them, you walk away a changed person. It forces you to think about your life in a way that you've never previously considered.
Yeah.
It is, I mean, there were things about this, and so 2016, 2017, at that point, I've been teaching anthropology for about 2 years. So we had a lot of conversations about patriarchy, about patriarchal religious systems, about toxic masculinity. Like these are conversations I was having all the time with my students. But like reading this in this narrative form is exactly why the best way to critique culture and society is often through fiction. Because this got down to my depths, and I was deeply uncomfortable with pie at first because I grew up in a relatively conservative household, Catholic, and so a lot of the concepts and ideas that Clive Barker is playing with were like, but I was, at that point I had been in the field and done research as an anthropologist, and I had my culture and ideas challenged many times over, but even still, there were elements of this that really shook me to my core and the way that I perceive my own gender. It's actually caused me to like consider like, do I really fit in this masculine system? And I don't really think I do, but I don't necessarily identify as trans either. But it's like I don't really feel like I necessarily fit in. And Clive Barker kind of gives you permission to say these things are just masks. These things are just they're just kind of cultural options in a way where you actually kind of fall in love with the idea of being your truly authentic self through this story.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I remember reading it and finishing it and thinking to myself, man, I just really want to try as hard as I can to be myself. I don't know what that looks like, but I'm going to find out. And it's kind of a lot of what I've been doing since I read this the first time. So then rereading it again, I guess almost 10 years later, and I've gone through a lot of changes in my life because 10 years ago I was just entering my 30s and now I'm just entering my 40s. There was a lot of reflection, and so it really, this book just blows me away.
Yeah, it often gets referred to as a masterpiece, and that's not wrong.
Yeah, it is it is. I mean, I've read most of his books. I still like Weave World a little better
for sheer reread value. Weave World is it's fun.
It is fun, and it also has a heart-wrenching, beautiful ending as well. This is have a heart-wrenching. I mean, he does not. But The Great and Secret Show is another incredible work of his.
Yeah.
And then also the sequel to that, Everville. I haven't read the young adult series he has, Aberrat.
Yeah, I have not read that.
I've not read that, but really, it's just a matter of time because he really, truly. I think he's one of the greatest writers of living writers. I think he's one of the greatest living writers out there. I don't think that if you want a truly unique story, if you want something that you could not have possibly just come up with just in pop culture, that is truly imaginative, I mean, worlds and myth and lore and creatures unlike any you've ever experienced, Imajica is the book for you.
Yeah, yeah, and could be your gateway drug into the rest of his work,
It was for
which
me.
I highly recommend. And his other work ranges from fantasy all the way just to gritty horror to supernatural mysteries to, I mean, it's all
There's
over the place.
what is it? Galilee is just a straight up romance.
Hmm.
And I like that one less because it's a straight up romance, but it's a supernatural romance. It's about
Yeah,
an
yeah,
immortal family who falls in love with a mortal kind of thing. It's a semi Beauty and the Beast sort of
yeah,
situation.
yeah.
But so he writes, and he also writes comics. He's directed I don't even know how many plays and films and all kinds of stuff. I mean, he's a true treasure for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, and if you ever, I don't know if you've ever read his children's book, The Thief of Always.
But it's on my list.
Yeah, it's fantastic. He illustrated that one. He's also a really talented visual artist. Um,
Painter. Hmm.
yeah, I think he does sculpture as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All around super genius,
Yeah,
creative for sure.
yeah.
So
And again, do recommend, as we mentioned much earlier, in interviews, he is an absolute delight. I highly recommend his interviews.
yeah,
His voice nowadays is a little screwy because he developed throat polyps quite probably from smoking cigars, which he finally gave up.
yeah.
But he had to have surgery, and it kind of made his voice a little different.
He
But
almost died a couple of times. Actually, he was in a coma once
yeah, from a dental
from a
procedure.
dental procedure. Yeah, got an
Yeah,
infection or
and
something.
went into toxic shock.
Yep, in
Yeah.
septic shock and became out of it, and now he currently, as of now, is like trying to finish up his stories that are like hanging the third book of the books of the art series, and then Abarat, finishing up Abarat, and he said another collection of stories he's been meaning to finish. So
Yeah.
he's kind of like, I'm old now. I'm gonna try to finish up my stuff before I go to help. It's like we appreciate you, sir.
Yeah, yeah. But apparently right now, like even though he had those health struggles for a while, apparently he's doing great now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
good to know. Like, because again, after like, so like when I hit about halfway through this, I was like, how's he doing right now anyway?
Yeah.
And good news, everyone. He's doing great. He's doing fine. Yeah, definitely recommend. This was probably a less discussion, but if we discussed too much, we would stretch into a 3-hour podcast, and nobody needs that.
And we're already at an hour and 40.
Yeah. So
an hour, that's just the summary. I promise you guys, I tried really hard to make that summary concise, but it was there's and we skimmed over so much. So many incredible scenes. And just the beauty and the poetry of his writing is just, I mean, I know when I get stuck on my own writing, there's a couple of people I go to. Ursula K. Le Guin, Ray Bradbury, and Clive Barker are usually the ones that I turn to and just reread passages. Not even the whole book. Sometimes just rereading passages to really get a taste for like beautiful writing.
yeah.
So he'll terrify you, he'll disgust you, but he'll make it beautiful and he'll make it worth it. So.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, that's it for this edition. We will be back for a third episode. For Imajica was today. We are going to be reading every undergrad's favorite philosophy book, Ishmael, about a telepathic gorilla who has some thoughts on this whole human experiment thing. So I read this as an undergrad, like pretty standard anthropology read. Athena actually read it out of college.
Yeah, a friend of mine just gave it was like, "Hey, you should read this," and gave me his copy.
But this one is not a beast book. It's only like 200-300 pages. So.
Yeah, it's a fairly short book. So
we're taking a little bit of a break from the beastly ones. We'll return later to those, but
yes, yeah.
But we can. It's like an obscure text because like. What the hell is a telepathic gorilla doing human commentary?
Yeah,
like it's a
and if you were an undergrad in certain studies, you probably read it. Otherwise, you probably have never even heard of it.
Yeah.
It's like if you were in philosophy or anthropology, real good chance you read it in college.
Not for class. Just because everyone would always talk about it.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, you got to read Ishmael. It'll blow your mind. So we'll be covering that one next time. We'll have a date up shortly. Check us out, and thanks for joining us for Imajica today. Bye-bye. I was really trying to be condensed.